Picture this. June 1941. You've got Operation Barbarossa kicking off the biggest invasion ever. German Panzer crews, they're rolling east. Super confident, best tactics, think they own armored warfare.
And why wouldn't they be? I mean, look at their track record. Blitzkrieg had just steamrolled Poland, then France. They absolutely saw themselves as top dog, technologically, doctrinally, everything.
Right. They figured Soviet stuff was, basically junk. Old, unreliable tanks.
Exactly. Their own intelligence kind of backed that up, unfortunately for them. They heard rumors, about maybe some heavier Soviet tanks, KV-1, T-34, but mostly dismissed it. Looked at the Winter War against Finland and thought, see, they're not up to much.
So fast forward, a German Panzer crew, probably feeling pretty good, spots this kind of crude-looking Soviet tank coming out of the woods in Lithuania.
Yeah, doesn't look sophisticated.
Yeah.
So they line up their shot. Cancer the third probably got that 50-millimeter gun that worked wonders back in France. They fire.
Bang. Direct hit, square on the front armor, and nothing happens.
Nothing. The shell just bounces off. One account says, like a pebble. Can you imagine the shock in that turret?
Utter disbelief. They fire again, maybe closer range. Still nothing. Just ricochets.
And then that crude tank, the T-34, it turns its turret. And within minutes, you've got 3 German tanks burning.
The survivors are scrambling back, totally bewildered, asking that question, echoing all along the front. What the hell just happened?
What the hell happened is exactly what we're diving into today. This is all about the T-34. The tank that didn't just stop German shells, it stopped German confidence cold and completely changed the game on the Eastern Front.
Yeah, our sources show this story of, genius engineering hiding in plain sight. Looked basic, but the thinking behind it, revolutionary. We want to take you right into that moment when the Germans stopped laughing and started sweating.
Okay, so to really get the T-34's impact, you got to feel that German confidence level in June 41. Barbarossa was immense. 3 million troops, 3,600 tanks. They expected a quick win.
They were the masters of blitzkrieg, right? Speed, coordination, air power. The tank was the point of the spear.
And they believed their spear was, perfect. Their tanks, the Panzer III, the Panzer IV, they were well made for the time, great optics, crucially, excellent radios, something the Soviets mostly lacked early on. That communication edge was huge.
Plus, their crews were battle-hardened. Poland, France, they knew what they were doing. They figured they'd just roll over the Soviets.
Yeah, and that belief was built on some pretty shaky intel, as it turned out. They underestimated Soviet factories big time. And then there was the Winter War hangover.
Ah, right. The Finns gave the Soviets a bloody nose, so the Germans figured all Soviet gear must be rubbish.
Pretty much. It colored their whole perception. They marched in expecting, tractors with guns bolted on. That mindset made the T-34 encounter just devastating psychologically.
So June 22nd, 1941, they crossed the border full of confidence. How long did that last? Days? Weeks?
Try days, maybe even hours in some sectors. The first real smackdown happened up in the Baltics. WWII, Lithuania is the famous one.
And the initial reports coming back must have sounded crazy to high command.
Totally. Commanders probably thought the troops were panicking, exaggerating, invulnerable tanks, nonsense, but the reports kept coming.
Often involving the Panzer III, their main battle tank then. That 50-millimeter gun had been effective elsewhere.
Yeah, it could handle British Matildas, French tanks. So near Rossini, a Panzer III spots a T-34, takes aim from, say, 800 meters, good range, fires, direct hit. Nothing. Barely a scratch on the paint, according to some accounts. So they think, okay, maybe too far out. They close the distance, 400 meters, fire again.
Still nothing.
Worse, the shell just skips off, violently, ricochet. Now they're realizing something is seriously wrong.
What does that do to a crew? Your main weapon, the thing you trust your life to, suddenly doesn't work.
Instant panic. Your whole world collapses. Because doctrine, training, everything assumes your gun works. And while they're figuring this out, the T-34, probably pretty calmly, turns its big 76-millimeter turret.
And boom, takes out the Panzer III. Then maybe the Panzer I that was trying to help.
Exactly. And this wasn't just one bad encounter. This pattern repeated across the front. This was the new, terrifying reality.
How did the bigwigs react? Guys like Guderian, the father of Blitzkrieg.
Well, Guderian was sharp. The reports were so consistent and alarming, he actually stopped his advance, which is a huge deal to go see for himself. He ordered captured T-34s and KV-1s rounded up for immediate testing. He knew this could wreck the whole campaign.
And the tests, did they confirm the nightmare?
Absolutely. Confirmed everything the frontline troops were screaming about. Their standard anti-tank gun, the little 37-millimeter pack, utterly useless. Couldn't penetrate the T-34 frontally at any range. Zip.
Okay, but the tank guns, the 50 millimeters on the Panzer III.
That was the real shocker. The test showed it could penetrate the T-34, but only from the side or rear. And only at point-blank range, like under 200 meters sometimes, maybe 500 if you were lucky and hit perfectly flat.
So let me get this straight. The T-34 can kill the Panzer III from maybe 1,500 meters, while the Panzer III has to basically drive right up next to it, hope the T-34 doesn't shoot first, and pray for a lucky side shot.
That's the brutal math they were facing. Their main tank gun, the backbone of the Panzer divisions, was effectively neutered. They had invaded deep into enemy territory with tanks that couldn't reliably fight the main enemy tank.
That's not just a problem, that's a catastrophe.
It was a full-blown strategic crisis, just weeks into the invasion.
Yeah.
Required a complete rethink, fast.
Okay, so the Germans capture some T-34s, take them apart. They must have expected to find massively thick steel plates, right? To explain why their shells weren't getting through.
That was a logical assumption, based on their own design philosophy. If you want more protection, add more steel. But that wasn't the T-34 secret.
No.
No, the actual physical thickness of the frontal plate was only 45 millimeters, which was, get this, thinner than the 50 millimeter plate some later Panzer III were already using.
Wait, thinner? How does that make sense?
That's the genius of Mikhail Koshkin and his team. It wasn't about how much steel, it was about how the steel was arranged. Geometry. Physics.
So ditching the old build a thicker wall idea.
Exactly. German, British, American tanks, they mostly used vertical or near vertical armor plates. Protection depended purely on thickness. Koshkin's team at Kharkov basically said, what if we angle the armor dramatically?
How did angling that 45 millimeter plate make such a difference?
Two big reasons. First, effective thickness. Think about it. If a shell hits a flat vertical plate, it just has to punch through 45 millimeters of steel.
Right, straight path.
But angle that same 45 millimeter plate back, say 60 degrees from the vertical, which is what the T-34 did on its front glasses. Now the shell has to travel through much more metal along its trajectory.
It's taking a longer diagonal path through the steel.
Precisely. That 60-degree slope made the 45 millimeter plate act like it was effectively 90 millimeters thick against a direct hit. Double the protection, basically, without doubling the weight. Super efficient.
Okay, that's clever. Doubling protection without the weight penalty. But you said two reasons. What was the other effect? The one that really freaked out the Germans?
Deflection, or ricochet. When a shell hits a vertical plate, it tries to bite into the steel, transferring all its kinetic energy straight in for penetration.
Okay.
But when it hits a steeply sloped surface like the T-34's, the physics change. Much of that impact energy gets redirected sideways. The shell tends to skid or glance off rather than digging in.
Like trying to hammer a nail into a board that's angled really sharply away from you, the hammer blow just glances off.
Perfect analogy. The shell just couldn't get a good grip to deliver its penetrating force. It might break up, it might deform, but a huge chunk of its energy was wasted just sliding off the slope. German shells weren't necessarily weak. The armor was just designed to defeat them geometrically.
And this wasn't just the front plate, was it? The sloping idea was everywhere.
That's the other brilliant part. It was a total design philosophy. The whole sides were sloped, the rear was sloped, even the turret had angled surfaces. The whole tank was conceived around maximizing the chance of deflection no matter where the hit came from.
Which explains why flanking was so hard too. Even side shots weren't guaranteed kills if the angle wasn't right.
Absolutely. It made the T-34 tough from almost any aspect. This technical superiority created this huge psychological impact. You had German crews firing, hitting, and just watching their shells bounce off harmlessly.
It flips the script completely.
Right.
They went from hunter to hunted.
Totally. There's that quote from a German soldier, something like, there's nothing more frightening. You hit them, and they just keep coming. That captures the feeling. The T-34 wasn't just a tank. It was this relentless, seemingly unstoppable force.
So incredible armor. But a tank is more than just armor, right? If it was slow and clumsy, the Germans might have eventually figured out how to deal with it. But the T-34 was designed for its environment. Let's talk mobility.
Mobility was absolutely key. See, German tanks were really good on roads, European roads. They weren't primarily designed for the endless mud, snow, and basically roadless terrain of the Soviet Union.
But the T-34 was.
Built for it. Two big things. First, those wide tracks. They spread the tank's weight about 26 tons early on over a much larger area, lower ground pressure.
Which means it didn't sink into the mud so easily.
Exactly. It could handle the Rasputitsa, that infamous spring and fall mud season, way better than the German Panzers, which often just got hopelessly stuck. The T-34 kept moving when entire German divisions were immobilized. Huge advantage.
And it used that Christie suspension, right? Known for off-road performance.
Yeah, that was a licensed American design, actually. It gave the T-34 surprisingly good cross-country speed. It could hit over 50 kilometers per hour on a road, sure, but crucially, it could maintain decent speed over rough ground where German tanks had to crawl. Allowed for flanking, quick redeployments.
Then there's the winter factor, those brutal Russian winters, German engines freezing up.
Big problem for the Germans. Their gasoline engines just hated the extreme cold, -30, -40 Celsius. Hard to start, sometimes impossible. The T-34 used a V2 diesel engine.
Diesel's better in the cold.
Generally more reliable, yeah. Less volatile fuel, the engine design itself handled the temperatures better. When German armor was frozen solid, T-34s could often still start and operate. That played a massive role in the Soviet winter counteroffensives, like outside Moscow in 41-42.
Okay, so it's tough, it moves well in the conditions. What about the gun? Did it have the punch to match the armor?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
In 1941, the T-34's 76mm main gun was significantly more powerful than anything the Germans had on their main tanks. We mentioned the Panzer III's 50mm gun.
Which couldn't reliably penetrate the T-34.
Right. But the T-34's 76mm could slice through the Panzer III's armor from like 1,500 meters out, maybe even further.
So the T-34 completely outranged the German tanks.
Massively. It meant the T-34 could often get the first shot, maybe the second, the third too, before the Panzer was even close enough to have a chance of hurting it, even from the side. That's a recipe for disaster for the Germans.
Dictating the terms of engagement every time.
Pretty much. And that 76mm gun wasn't just good against tanks. It fired a very effective high explosive, or HE, round 2. So it could take out anti-tank gun crews, infantry positions, bunkers.
Yeah.
It was a genuine all-rounder on the battlefield.
Okay, armor, mobility, firepower. Sounds like the perfect tank. But hang on, we need to be balanced here. The sources are pretty clear it had some serious downsides too, especially inside the turret.
Yes. Crucial point. For all its brilliance, the T-34 was not perfect, especially the early models. Koshkin's design prioritized production speed and combat effectiveness over, say, crew comfort or ergonomics.
And the big one was the turret crew.
The two-man turret. You had the commander and the loader. In most German tanks, you had a three-man turret. Commander, gunner, loader. The commander just commanded, observed, directed, used the radio.
But in the T-34?
The commander was the gunner. So he had to find targets, command the driver, tell the loader what shell to use, and aim and fire the main gun himself.
That sounds impossible. How could you possibly do all that effectively in combat?
You couldn't, really. It led to terrible situational awareness. T-34 crews often didn't see threats until it was too late. They couldn't react as quickly or coordinate as well as German crews with their dedicated commander. This is a major reason why, despite having the better tank on paper in 41, the Soviets took absolutely horrific losses.
So, superior machine, but maybe not always superior results initially because of the human factors in training.
Exactly. German training, crew coordination, and especially their radios gave them a tactical edge that helps offset the T-34's hardware advantages, particularly early on. Plus, the T-34 wasn't mechanically perfect either, especially first batches.
Oh, what kind of problems?
Things like poor air filters that meant the engines wore out really fast, and the transmission and clutch were notoriously unreliable. You hear stories of gearboxes failing after just a few hundred kilometers. It was a tough design, but quality control under wartime pressure was often lacking.
Right. Which brings us to maybe the ultimate factor, the one that really buried the Germans, the production philosophy.
This is where the T-34 truly won the war, you could argue. It was designed from the ground up, not just to be effective, but to be mass-produced, easily, quickly, cheaply.
Fewer complex parts, simpler construction.
Yep. Compared to the German Panzers, which were like intricate watches, the T-34 was more like a robust tractor. Easier welding, less machining, components designed for production by less skilled workers, which was crucial as the war dragged on and experienced labor became scarce.
And the numbers. The production numbers are just mind-blowing.
Aren't they? The Soviet Union managed to produce, get this, 84,070 T-34s in its variants between 1940 and 1945. 84,000.
And the Germans. Total tank production, all types.
For the entire war. Maybe around 49,000. Less than 50,000 tanks total.
Wow. So the Soviets built almost twice as many T-34s alone as the Germans built of everything combined.
Pretty much. The implication is huge. Even when the Germans knocked out T-34s, and they knocked out thousands, the factories were just churning out replacements faster than the Germans could destroy them. It became a brutal war of attrition that Germany simply couldn't win industrially.
There's that quote from German General von Mellenthin, right? We had nothing comparable. He wasn't just talking about the tank's specs, but the whole system behind it.
Exactly. German tanks were precision instruments needing skilled crews and careful maintenance. The T-34 was tough, relatively simple, generally reliable enough, and overwhelmingly numerous. It was the ultimate weapon of war, designed for the realities of total industrial conflict. Quantity has a quality all its own, as they say.
So, back to the summer of 41. The reports are flooding in. Guderian's confirmed the tests. The German high command must have been in full-blown panic mode. They're realizing their wonder weapon, the Panzer, is suddenly second best.
Oh, absolutely. Panic is the right word. Emergency meetings were called almost immediately, July 1941. They knew this wasn't just a minor hiccup. The T-34 threatened the entire premise of Barbarossa. Guderian's reports emphasized the collapsing morale, too. Crews were literally refusing to engage T-34s head-on. Who could blame them?
So what could they do immediately? They can't just magic up new tanks overnight.
No. So first, tactics. They had to lean on what they still did better. Training, optics, and especially radio communication. T-34s often lacked radios initially, making coordinated attacks very difficult for the Soviets.
So use superior coordination to hit them where they're weak.
Exactly. Doctrine immediately shifted. Never engage a T-34 frontally if you can avoid it. Use teamwork, speed, maneuver to get side or rear shots, target the tracks or suspension to immobilize it first, then try to finish it off.
A sort of tactical Band-Aid on a strategic bullet wound.
Pretty much. It works sometimes, thanks to German crew skill, but it wasn't a real solution. They needed better weapons urgently.
Which led to things like the PaK-40 anti-tank gun.
Yes, the 75mm PaK-40. Development was massively accelerated. This gun could reliably penetrate the T-34's frontal armor at decent combat ranges. It was the weapon the infantry desperately needed.
But getting it to the front lines in numbers must have taken time, right? German industry wasn't necessarily built for rapid pivots like that.
Huge challenge. The PaK-40 was a bigger, more complex gun. Needed more resources, specialized manufacturing. It really wasn't until well into 1942 that they started appearing in significant numbers where they were needed most. So for months, almost a year in some cases, the German soldier often faced the T-34 with inadequate weapons.
And during this crisis, the Germans paid the T-34 the ultimate compliment, didn't they? They actually thought about just copying it.
They seriously considered it. Stripped down captured T-34s, analyzed every bolt, looked at the sloped armor, the diesel engine, the suspension. The quickest way to catch up would have been to just build their own version, a Panzer T-34.
Makes sense. Why didn't they do it?
Couple of big reasons, mostly industrial. Their factories were tooled up for gasoline engines, not the T-34's V2 diesel. Major headache. Also, things like the T-34's specific steel alloys and casting techniques weren't easily replicated within the existing German system, retooling their entire tank industry mid-war. Just too difficult, too disruptive.
So instead of copying, they adapted. They took the ideas.
Right. They learned the lesson of sloped armor, and that led directly to their next generation of tanks, most famously the Panther.
The Panther, introduced in 43, often seen as the direct German answer to the T-34.
It definitely borrowed heavily. Look at the Panther's front hull, very T-34-esque slope. It also mounted a powerful long-barreled 75mm gun that outclassed the T-34's 76mm. On paper, the Panther was designed to be superior in almost every way.
But there's always a but with these German designs, it seems.
The classic German problem, over-engineering. The Panther was complex. That interleave road wheel system looked cool and gave a smooth ride, but good luck repairing it in the field, especially if it got clogged with mud and froze solid.
A maintenance nightmare.
Huge one. And crucially, they rushed it into service for the Battle of Kursk. The early Panthers were plagued with mechanical problems, transmissions failing, engines catching fire. They were just too complicated, too fragile initially, and took way more resources and time to build than a T-34.
So, technically advanced, but maybe strategically flawed. What about the other big cat, the Tiger? That took a different approach, didn't it? Less sloping, more sheer thickness.
Exactly. The Tiger was brute force. Forget fancy angles. Let's just put massive amounts of thick vertical steel up to 100mm on the front, and then mount the legendary 88mm gun, which could kill pretty much anything. The Tiger was designed to be untouchable, a breakthrough tank.
Terrifying for Allied crews, no doubt, but industrially.
A strategic disaster, really. It was incredibly expensive, used up vast amounts of scarce materials like tungsten and molybdenum. It was so heavy it broke down constantly, couldn't cross many bridges, needed special railway cars to move.
Logistical nightmare.
Complete nightmare. And the production numbers tell the story. How many Tigers did they build in the entire war?
About 1,350, something like that?
Yeah. 1,347 Tigers S. Compare that again to 84,000 T-34s. The Tiger was an amazing piece of engineering, tactically dominant when it worked, but industrially irrelevant in the grand scheme. It proved the T-34's philosophy of good enough and lots of them was the war-winning one.
So even after the Panther and Tiger arrived, that initial shock of the T-34, that dread, it lingered.
It never really went away. You still see accounts from German tankers late in the war talking about the respect, bordering on fear they had for the T-34. They developed specific tactics just for dealing with them, like letting them pass and hitting the tracks from behind. It wasn't just another tank. It had fundamentally changed their perception of the enemy. That quote sums it up. Ivan's T-34 is the best tank in the world. We only beat it with superior tactics and luck. Luck shouldn't be a primary factor in your doctrine.
We've talked a lot about the machine, but there's always a human story behind the innovation. The T-34's genius largely came from one man, Mikhail Koshkin, and tragically, he never saw his creation dominate the battlefield.
Koshkin's story is really quite something. Born into poverty near the end of the Tsarist era, worked in a candy factory as a kid, the revolution opened doors, allowed him to get an engineering education he never would have had otherwise.
And he ends up as chief designer at the Kharkov factory in '37, right in the middle of Stalin's purges, which must have been a terrifying time to be pushing radical ideas.
Absolutely. And his ideas were radical for the time. Sloped armor wasn't the accepted norm. He faced a lot of resistance from conservative elements in the military bureaucracy. They wanted thicker, conventional armor. They thought his design was too risky, too unconventional. Even Stalin was apparently skeptical initially.
But Koshkin stuck to his guns, believed in the physics.
He did. But belief wasn't enough. He needed to prove it dramatically, which led to that incredible event in the winter of 1940.
The drive to Moscow.
Yeah. To overcome the doubters, Koshkin decided on the ultimate field test. He personally led a team driving 2 prototype T-34s on a grueling 750-kilometer trek from Kharkov all the way to Moscow, in secret, through snow and freezing conditions.
Just to show Stalin and the top brass that this thing actually worked, that it was reliable, that it could handle the Russian terrain.
Exactly. They arrived at the Kremlin. The tanks performed flawlessly in demonstrations. That performance finally convinced Stalin to authorize mass production. It was Koshkin's ultimate vindication.
At the cost.
The cost was immense. That brutal winter drive, likely exposed to the elements for long periods. Koshkin contracted severe pneumonia. He kept working, refining the design, even while desperately ill.
But he didn't recover, did he?
No. Mikhail Koshkin died on September 26, 1940. He was only 42 years old, just months before Operation Barbarossa began. He never saw a single T-34 in combat against the Germans.
Incredible sacrifice. He literally gave his life to get his revolutionary design approved and built.
It really underscores the human cost and the incredible pressure cooker environment of Soviet industry just before the war. His legacy, though, is just enormous.
We mentioned the 84,000 units produced. That scale is hard to grasp. It was everywhere on the Eastern Front.
Everywhere. Moscow 41, Stalingrad, Kursk 43, the biggest tank battle in history, Operation Bagration, the final assault on Berlin. The T-34 was there, usually in huge numbers. It became the absolute symbol of Soviet resistance and eventual victory.
And you hear it from the guys who crewed them, that quote from Dmitry Loza. The T-34 was not comfortable, it was not sophisticated, but it was effective. And in war, that's all that matters.
Perfectly sums it up. And that effectiveness gave it an incredibly long life after World War II ended.
Right, it wasn't just a WWII tank, it kept showing up.
Korea, absolutely. Early in the Korean War, T-34s basically rolled over the American M24 Chaffee light tanks, fought all over the Middle East, in various conflicts in Africa, Asia. Some were reportedly still in reserve service in a few countries into the 21st century. Just unbelievable durability.
But maybe its biggest legacy isn't the number of units or years in service, but the idea it proved, the sloped armor concept.
Without a doubt. The T-34 definitively proved that intelligently sloped armor was far superior to just piling on thick vertical plates. That principle, maximizing effective thickness and deflection through geometry, is fundamental to literally every main battle tank design since.
So when you look at a modern tank like an M1 Abrams or a Leopard 2 or even the latest Russian T-90s or T-14s, you're seeing Koshkin's legacy in those angled surfaces.
Directly. He changed tank design forever. The T-34 also cemented that ongoing debate in military procurement. Quantity versus quality, or maybe the quality of quantity.
Yeah, is it better to have a few perfect but incredibly expensive and complex machines, or vast numbers of good enough platforms that are reliable, easily produced, and replaceable?
The T-34 provided a pretty compelling answer for the conditions of the Eastern Front. It showed that mass, reliability, and suitability for the operating environment could overcome exquisite but fragile technology. It's a lesson military planners still grapple with today, whether they're talking about fighter jets, drones, or the next generation of armored vehicles. #OutTrick@Row.
So let's bring it back to where we started. That moment in Lithuania, June 1941, that German shell bouncing harmlessly off the T-34, it wasn't just steel deflecting steel.
No, it was much bigger than that.
Yeah.
It was, in a way, ideology deflecting ideology. That ricochet shattered the core Nazi belief in their inherent technological and, frankly, racial superiority over the Soviets. The T-34 was rolling, tangible proof that Soviet engineers could innovate brilliantly, and Soviet industry could outproduce the German war machine.
Now, obviously, the T-34 didn't win the war single-handedly. You had the vastness of Russia, the brutal winter, huge amounts of lend-lease aid from the Allies, especially the U.S., and just unbelievable Soviet sacrifice.
Absolutely, it was a confluence of many factors. But the T-34 was the crucial tool that allowed the Red Army to absorb the initial shock, to survive, and then to fight back effectively. It gave them the means to wage and ultimately win that brutal war of attrition.
The Germans learned the hard way. Never underestimate your opponent and never assume your technological edge is permanent. Simple, revolutionary ideas combined with mass production can overturn everything.
That geometry, that simple slope on the T-34's armor, fundamentally bent the trajectory of armored warfare.
Which leaves us with a final thought for you to chew on. The T-34 showed how a seemingly simple design shift could shatter long-held assumptions about superiority. So what deeply ingrained beliefs do we hold today maybe about technology, industry, AI, whatever, that might just be waiting for their own T-34 moment? Waiting for a simple, perhaps overlooked revolutionary idea to come along and change the entire game. Something to think about.